I love the idea of the wine cellar of games.
Oh my God.
The gaming sommelier
so
where they
fun.
go, what do you feel like today? You can book online. The most awesome thing is the spreadsheet database I would make of all the games.
Yeah. Maybe a knit and natter is the more polite version of Stitch and Bitch. You bring along your craft, sit with people, have something nice from the cafe and chat while you're crafting. I met some other people. One was making a sock, another a hat, another painting a pair of Warhammer models.
If you want to support your local community, then you can't be charging premium prices. You have to pitch it at a reasonable price point to make it as accessible as possible. And so that means that all these overheads are going to be extremely challenging.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Gaming the System, the podcast where three intersectional feminists examine gaming and games through a feminist lens. Today, I'm your host, Alex, and I'm joined by my friends Jem and Matt. Before we get started, if you want to support us, you can subscribe to our Patreon at patreon.com/gaming the system for some exclusive content. Or you can send us a one-off donation via PayPal to our email address, wearegamingthesystem@gmail.com.
Hello and welcome to part 2 of our look at community gaming. We're going to focus in on board game cafes. Kind of want to kick off with painting a picture. What is the stereotypical board game cafe that comes into your mind? Do you think it's based on perhaps some incorrect assumptions about people who go to board game cafes, or do you think it's changing now?
My sort of first experience of a board game cafe was a really positive one, of like a very modern cafe called Dicebox. Our local Green Party was having a fundraising, awareness raising evening thing there. So I think they were doing a board game that was just a board gaming evenings, like a bit of a social. But an opportunity for them to get people engaged with the party. So that was my first experience, and it was great because it had loads and loads of different games to choose from. They were very much like, if you need any help, we can come and give you a hand and, you know, show you how to play games. There was like nice food to order. It was all very bright and clean and good drinks. It wasn't expensive. It was just a really nice space. The only thing that didn't work so well for me was it's very noisy because there's not a lot of soft furnishings. But I think if you'd asked me this question before I'd gone to that one, I would have said maybe it would have been like one of those scenes out of an old school horror movie where you walk into the pub and everyone goes quiet and like all the locals turn and stare at you because you've just walked in and, you know, who are you and who's this person, and that it would be very sort of uncomfortable and awkward to sort of know what to do and all of that. So I think that would have been my idea of how it was. One of my ex-boyfriends was a massive Magic the Gathering fan, and he used to go and play probably Games Workshops actually or somewhere like that, and they used to have tournaments and things. So I didn't actually go to any of those with him because they just sounded like very male, too geeky. I liked Magic the Gathering. I thought that the cards were beautiful. I liked the game as well. It just felt like a very male-dominated kind of hardcore environment.
Definitely. It's interesting because my partner would frequent a board game cafe with the perhaps stereotypical image of tournaments for people who play Yu-Gi-Oh! And Magic the Gathering and maybe need to be told about their personal hygiene every now and then. I asked him about it. I said, how does it compare with Wayfarers? And he said they're giving off completely different vibes, which is really interesting because he loves going to both, but plays different types of games in each one. From outside the gaming community, you might hear a board game cafe and think it's only a place for nerds. Maybe. and it might be off-putting for you.
It's a bit like pubs, isn't it?
Well, I suppose, yeah. It did remind me of our episode when we talked about pubs once, didn't we, and pub games, and how intimidating those sorts of spaces can be sometimes. Yeah.
But I mean, you can have your sort of country local pub where, you probably would walk in and people will look at you. But then there's also like the local gastro pub where you're going to pay too much for everything, but it's going to be reasonably good quality. Yeah. And then you've got your Wetherspoons and all those other kind of environments. They can be very different environments to go into. And I think it's about finding the one that works for you, isn't it?
So my general assumption about board game cafes is that the board games are secondary to it just being a pub or a cafe. It always feels like it's a pub or a cafe with a few board games at the side, which defeats the point for me. There needs to be specific places where the purpose is to go and play games or learn to play games. And then it's also got food and drink options available as well, although I don't know how you can keep everything clean, all the game pieces clean if you're having food there as well. I agree about the vibe of places being very different for different people. When we talked about the pub games, there's some horror stories about being in a pub as women that men don't need to think about, and that has to be understood by the management of the place. Hopefully it seems like these two hosts understand right, this is an unconditional safe space. You come in here, you're safe. And all you need to do is come along and play some games, and that's it. And if it doesn't have that vibe to it, then it's going to fall prey to so many other public spaces that are just in the mold of the patriarchy and therefore are going to be limited in how positive a space they can be. And it just needs more good examples to show the way of what's possible.
One of the catalysts for this episode was the recent opening of a local board game cafe near me called Wayfarers Rest. And it's set up by two women, Sarah and Katie. They'd always had a dream to open up a board game cafe, and it became reality this year. It feels really welcoming, really cozy, really comfortable. Sarah and Katie themselves are absolutely lovely. They have already done a really great job of trying to integrate themselves into the community as a destination, not just for your typical gamers, but also for anyone of any age. Every time I've gone in, there's been a family in there with young kids, which is really nice to see. They did a lot of work to be a part of the local event that runs throughout August called Staycation. So they offered a free hour at the board game cafe with a table, come with your family, very much family orientated. They also offer quite a lot of sort of introduction to D&D, introduction to tabletop role-playing games, things in the evenings as well. Lots of different events depending on skill levels. I've been to what they call a Stitch and Bitch, which isn't exclusive to Wayfarers. It's something that happens across. You might hear it maybe a Knit and Natter, which is a more polite version of Stitch and Bitch. You bring along your craft, sit with people, have something nice from the cafe and chat while you're crafting. I met some other people. One was making a sock, another a hat, another painting a pair of Warhammer models, and so was Tom, who I'd brought along with me. So there was lots of crossover for different sorts of things. And in fact, the majority of people there were neurodivergent as well. I feel like a lot of neurodivergent people probably enjoy spending time in places like board game cafes, because it is essentially finding people who are interested in the things that you're interested in that might perhaps be more aligned with the interests of neurodivergent people. but I could be painting with a brush there, so I don't want to necessarily say that everyone that goes to board game cafes is neurodivergent, but I think they're probably maybe a larger percentage than the general population. But it feels like a very welcoming environment, and the good thing for me as a wheelchair user is that it was accessible as well. Didn't even have to get a ramp out, it was all level access, which was really lovely to be able to go and not worry about how I was going to get in or out of the building, which is a problem for another board game cafe that's slightly less local now. But it was something I would always have to think about. But so that's been my experience of Wayfarers so far, and I hope that they continue to involve themselves with the community. In fact, I was in one of those meetings that you have in councils where the entire council can drop in like a virtual meeting, and the head of the council runs it and talks about the goals for the next week or whatever. He was waxing lyrical about Wayfarers and said that he took his kids there at the weekend. That was quite a surprise to hear from him as well, which also shows you how much work they're doing in kind of getting the word out that Wayfarers is for everybody, which is lovely. So it kind of brings me on to the question, do you think that there is potential for communities to develop successful board game cafes? And are they useful just as gaming communities? Or is there something larger that could be achieved? So can we use board game cafes to create a more connected community, essentially?
Of course we can. I think the biggest problem is that space on the high street is really expensive. Food is really expensive. The industry, the sort of restaurants and cafe industry is really struggling at the moment for all of these reasons. It's a very difficult, practical space to get into. I wanted to do a bit of a shout out actually. When I was at Fantasy Forest Festival in the summer, which is a big sort of geek fest at Sudeley Castle in Gloucestershire, there was a tent hosted by the Herefordshire Board Gamers, and they provided a space where they had tournaments running over the full 3 days, but they also had opportunities for games, and they were so nice. We just turned up there and this person was like, "Oh, hi, do you know about board gaming?" And just really welcoming. And then they were like, "Oh, what are you interested in? What kind of games do you play? What kind of games do you like? Oh, you might like this one, you might like that one." And then they came out, do you want us to show you how to play it? And we were like, "Oh yeah, if you could just give us the basics of this game." And then they came out and checked on us later. It felt really welcoming. I would have felt quite happy to go in there on my own. I mean, Fantasy Forest is a very lovely space anyway. So I'm not surprised that it felt so welcoming, but it was clearly so well hosted with volunteers who knew their games and were able to support you. So you could absolutely just go in and try something new. And they had D&D sessions where you could just watch or take part in it. They work with Mind and other organisations because they do a lot of fundraising, and they want to be a positive influence and be more than just a games night. So they are looking at building and supporting local community. Inclusion and accessibility is a really important thing for them. They want to support people getting into gaming and educating them, and they also want to raise money for charities. They don't have a cafe themselves. They host games nights in different venues around the city. They're a little bit far for me, unfortunately, but I think that might be a better way for these types of groups to properly get involved in local communities by moving around, just because of the practical cost of physically having a single base where you go. I mean, obviously that would be the preference, I think. And whenever I walk past the dice box in Worcester, it's always got people in it. There's always, it can be the middle of the week, the middle of the day, and there's people in there. I do worry about how cost effective those kind of setups are. And if you want to support your local community, then you can't be charging premium prices. You have to pitch it at a reasonable price point to make it as accessible as possible. And so that means that all these overheads are going to be extremely challenging. So without charitable support or grants or whatever, I think it's going to be really difficult for these places to survive as a sort of viable business concern. But something that you can take around with you to different places, like a properly organised group, is a really great idea. And a really good way of bringing the community together and engaging different generations and different abilities and all of that. So yeah, I do think it's the way forward. There's been a real shift, certainly in my local area, towards community building and local organisation, because I think there's such disaffection with the wider political direction that we're seeing in our country and in the world in general. I think people are feeling insecure about where those people are taking us. And I think that a lot of people feel that actually the way we can protect ourselves and insulate ourselves is to build our local communities. And so, maybe that's what I would be looking at.
What do you think, Matt?
There's so much potential with it. And Jem is completely right that the economic, just miserable situation we have been forced into and continue to be deteriorating into. People have never had less disposable income en masse. And when you don't have any disposable income, it's because you have to spend all of it on living expenses. If you don't have spare money to spend on something non-essential like a board gaming cafe, then those places aren't going to make enough money to break even, because you're not going to become a global corporation running a gaming cafe. It's a vocational thing that you can make if you go, right, we just want to make some decent money off of it so we can live well and continue to grow the business. But then if you want to start that, you need all the games themselves. You need a property to play them in. And the bigger the property is, the better placed it is. That price goes up and up, as is happening with a lot of housing. Now that some corporations are just getting so massive, they just buy properties and rent them to people rather than people being able to rent them themselves because they don't have enough money to. And so, or if we go, right, those barriers, if those barriers lessened, whatever, or if those things weren't an issue, being a community hub for, like we've been saying, strangers can come together and in a safe place and learn to play something. So making friends, making relationships, enjoying yourself in a way that you can't rush board games. You can just relax, play one game with 6 of us, chill out and have a few drinks. And it has the potential to be a low-cost night out for people to go, because there are so many different monetization strategies you can use. You can have a bottomless gaming thing where you come in, you pay £15 and you can play any game. You can sell the games and get sponsored by gaming companies. You can set up coaching courses where someone who wants to be a coach can learn how to coach and then get a qualification. With this, you can get those for a certain number of games. You go away for a weekend, you learn in detail how to play all these games, and then you can come in and make money from these places by going, right, okay, we're going to have 2 training sessions for members of the public to come in, and you can run those. It's a wonderful little economic boost to the community as well. It gets people coming in, working together, spending money in different areas, and the potential to just improve people's lives apart from being a board game cafe and the gaming positives in it. There are so many just general community things as well. It's hard to hate someone if you win a game alongside them. So I think that's a good place to start.
That brings me on to our last question for today, and that is, if money and space were no object, what would your ideal board game cafe be like? And some bonus questions. What would be on the menu of your board game cafe? And what games are a must-have?
I could talk for another 45 minutes on this. I'll talk for a little bit and then stop myself.
Okay.
First off, big property, fully accessible and not just physically accessible, taking into account all access needs. And I've got a list of those. Anyone who wants to hire me to consult about this, you can have my full list.
Amazing.
Have a creatively designed space so that you come in and go, right, it's not just an average looking place. You can have moving bookshelves. You can have tables that can move up and down. You've got art on the walls and just the sky's the limit. Exciting space. So you go, oh, I just want to be here and sit in this place because it's awesome on its own. So I'd be interested to see what you two think about this. So if it's a cafe, there's no alcohol. There's a limit to how insane things might become. There's a problem with, say, a pub, is that if it opens at 11 and they're serving alcohol from 11, then there are those incredibly scary men who just sit there all day, drinking pint after pint. Somehow having a way to serve alcohol without it turning all rowdy and weird, that would be a hard thing to do, but worth doing. And like I was saying earlier, having club nights and club sessions where you go, right, we're playing this game. The first hour will be teaching you. The second 2 hours will be playing. And we've got staff members on hand who know the game well. They're sort of like gaming lifeguards. Here you go, help, I don't know what to do next. And they can come over and help you out. The coaching programs where you can get people, especially young people, if you're like 16, 17, 18, come in, make a little bit of money, learn a skill, and yeah, so that'd be good. And I've got more, but you go ahead.
Have you seen those videos on YouTube where you have some music and it just plays for hours and it's like just a room and they're all AI created or like, you know, computer generated. You don't have to watch them for very long before you start seeing the loops. They have these like amazing libraries with these really comfy. That's what I want. I want somewhere that's comfortable because when I game, I like to be able to change my sitting position and I like to be able to snuggle up and reach all the stuff. But I also like to be able to sit back and you know, and one of the things that I found with the dice box was that it was all like plastic seats and plastic tables, which makes complete sense. I want something where you can sit, you can be cozy, because if you're going to be there for 2 or 3 hours, that actually really matters. I also would like a little bit more soft furnishing so you can find a little nook to play in, because if like me you have hearing problems, then being in a room with a lot of noise going on makes it a lot harder because you're trying to learn a new game and you can't hear anything anyone's saying. That's quite challenging. I would have rules about what you could have on the tables food wise, because I think you should absolutely be allowed to have snacks, but I don't think people should be allowed to have a whole meal at the table. That just gets in the way of everything, and you know, you don't want sticky fingers all over cards and dice and what have you. So I would serve food at the venue, but have to go somewhere else to eat the food, and then you could come back and play the game. And so you wouldn't lose your seat or anything. You basically have it set up like that. Alcohol, I think, I agree with you, Matt. I don't think anyone likes that weird guy that drinks all day. But good management would deal with that. If you were in an environment that was a sort of family friendly, focusing on being a nice environment, then they wouldn't allow somebody to get to that state. People should only be allowed in if they were either actually taking part in a game or with somebody who is taking part in the game. That would minimise the amount of hassle. It is quite nice to have a couple of drinks, but maybe we just don't need to start that until the evening session.
Yeah.
And up until then, it can be hot chocolate, coffee, and a nice cup of tea.
Indeed. And speaking of hot chocolate, I remember going to a different board game cafe, a slightly less local one now, and reflecting on what I'd got to drink and eat there. It's very much snack focused, and a lot of the times those snacks are like the ones you think of as nice little treats. So I had a hot chocolate. I also had a big slab of brownie, and then we all bought 3 different bowls of sweets to have for like the whole 3-hour period. And you know, you're on a sugar high, you come down off, but like you realise after, all I in the whole 3 hours was basically chocolate and sweets. So I'd want to have a way of having really great snacks, tasty snacks that we all want to have, but that are not unhealthy. It's difficult to know what to replace. So yeah, because you want it to be easy to eat as well. Particularly, like you say, if you can't have a separate space for eating, you need to be able to eat it with one hand. Because you might be holding, again...
Well, that's famously why the sandwich was invented, wasn't it?
Yeah, it raises a lot of food hygiene issues, doesn't it, really? You know, the hygiene of the board games, the pieces. Like you said, they have been awarded a 5 on the food hygiene rating scale, which is pleasing to know at Wayfarers. But yeah, how they keep the games clean is a mystery to me. So having some kind of cleaning system and maybe some healthy options on the menu. Definitely a menu that contains choices for vegan, vegetarian, gluten-free. What would your must-have games be in your board game cafes?
I would love that you'd have the really popular ones that you have multiple versions of. I love the idea of a wine cellar of games.
Oh my God. Yes.
Where you can go down and says, and you've got what are they called? They're called sommeliers.
Sommelier.
Yeah.
Sommelier. The gaming sommelier, where they go, what do you feel like today? You can book online. The most awesome thing is the spreadsheet database I would make of all the games. And you'd have a checklist you can each go through and go, what are you looking for? And they'll find you the perfect game.
That'd be really good. Oftentimes you spend the first half an hour deciding what to play, which is a lot of gaming time.
Yeah, that's true.
I also like be able to have partnerships with indie game developers like we did with that game that we looked at ages ago. Librarian, yeah.
Yes.
And then also you could have a build your own game thing where you can craft your own experience.
That'd be really
very
cool.
Exciting.
Those are lovely ideas.
I love that. And I think it would, for me, it would be like the high-end games would be a must, like all the ones that are really expensive to buy, but are really lovely, very tactile. So, you know, Wingspan would have to be in there, and, you know, all those kind of games that we all like to play, but, you know, you can't necessarily justify spending 70, 80 quid on or whatever. And that would be really good. And obviously indie games would be a must. And I think there would have to be like a D&D night, you know, and not just D&D either, because there's a whole heap of different role-playing games out there that get completely overlooked actually, but I'd really love for people to come along and play them because they're so popular on YouTube now, people playing these games. And I think you could even just come along and watch people playing. Watching good people play D&D is a lot of fun. You could have all sorts of activities like that, which I think would be really enjoyable for people. And I'm really now just thinking, could I set one up in my local village hall? You know, could we have like a games night once a month or once a quarter, something like that, you know? But it's the financial cost of actually getting the games. But I'm sure you could, you know, liaise with like one of the other, like a local organisation nearby that has libraries stock games, board games and things. You could probably liaise with them and be fun.
Definitely. Some ideas to go away with. That's been a really fun episode. Thank you, Betty. I really enjoyed exploring this topic. If you, listener or watcher, have any ideas, feel free to share them. share with your friends as well. And we'll have a new episode for you every Thursday. Thank you very much for listening and watching, and we'll see you again soon. Bye.
Bye. We hope you enjoyed that episode of Gaming the System. If you want to support us, you can donate to us through our PayPal by sending it to wearegamingthesystem@gmail.com if you want to send us a one-off donation. If you want to donate to us monthly, you can subscribe to our Patreon at patreon.com/gamingthesystem. Until next time, bye-bye.